Welcome to the Lovecraft E-Zine videocast and podcast. Today is February the 5th, 2017, and I don't know if anything else is going on today. Certainly not football, but thanks for watching, listening. If you're watching live, that is. I get the feeling that most of my audience will come later in the week for this particular episode. So, yeah, our guest is Stephen Graham Jones. Stephen, thanks for being on the show.
Honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. Why don't we do short introductions real quick and get those out of the way and start with Kelly.
I'm Kelly Young. I am the executive editor of Strange Eons magazine.
Rick.
And I'm Rick Lang, and I'm a writer.
All right, and I'm Mike Davis, and like I said, we have Stephen Graham Jones on the show today. So, Stephen, I guess one thing I know about you already, you're not into football. Is that right?
I've never been a football fan. No, I like to run real far and have somebody throw a ball to me. I like that, but that's the only part of football I like. Yeah. I don't like any of the tackling or that stuff. That's not fun.
Yeah, especially at our age, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, for those out there who don't know who you are, could you talk about yourself for a minute?
Yeah.
Both as a writer and what you do for a living.
As a writer, I've got 22 books, maybe 22 and a half, 16 novels, 6 collections. I do mostly horror. I like science fiction, fantasy too. I like westerns. I grew up on westerns. Let's see, I've got a lot of stories published, probably between 250 and 300 stories published. Like, that's counting reprints though, so that's cheating a little bit. And I teach at CU Boulder right now in the MFA program. And I also kind of moonlight at UCR Palm Desert teaching their low-res MFA program. And I kind of do some pinch hitting every once in a while for Institute of American Indian Arts, working with a thesis student or two. And I think that's what I do, man. And aside from that, I'm married, have a couple kids, a couple of dogs, too many trucks.
Yeah, I was going to say, in addition to all that, you have a family.
I do, yeah.
So,
that keeps me hopping, man.
Wow. Yeah, no kidding.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a book coming out in June, right? Mapping the Interior. You want to talk about that?
It's a novella. It's from Tor. And it's, I don't know how many pages it is. It's probably between 80 and 110 pages. I'm not even sure. 25,000 words or so. It's a ghost story. And, the hard part with ghosts for me is how to make a ghost scary. Because in most stories, ghosts are just like an apparition that can't interact with things. And how is that really going to do any damage to a person, Ghosts in stories, like, they're often the deliverers of exposition, which is kind of hokey, I think. So I had to try to find a way to make a ghost scary, because that's the task I gave myself. I'm going to use a ghost, and how do I make it scary? And maybe I found a way. Well, it scared me anyways.
You say you write in the horror genre. Is that how you would describe your work to someone who had never heard of you, never read you? What would you say about your work if someone asked you that question?
When I'm talking to my students, first day of the semester, and I tell them what kind of stories I like, I tell them I have a strong preference for stories in which things happen, rather than people just sitting around talking, or that kind of stuff doesn't interest me. I'm not saying it can't work, but because that's the kind of stuff that I have a taste for, I think that's the kind of stuff I try to write. Stories in which things happen, fiction in which things happen. And to me, horror, there's a lot happening in horror, and so I gravitate towards horror. I grew up on horror. I cut my teeth on horror, so that's always my default setting is horror. I go afield, I'll do literary stuff. I'll do stuff that people call innovative, which just means it's strange, I think. And I like science fiction a lot. That's always been actually my goal, is to become a science fiction writer. Vonnegut or Philip K. Dick or Stanislaw Lem or Ursula Le Guin, just that whole class of people impressed me so much. But I'm always waiting to be a better writer, because I consider science fiction to be where it's at. Every time I try to write science fiction, I'm always 3 or 4 pages in, and there's some alien creature ripping out a throat. I'm like, well, here we go again.
Horror, sci-fi.
Yeah. Which I like it. Don't get me wrong, I like it a lot. But I always figure like horror, it turns the 10-year-old inside of me into a kid hiding in the corner in the dark, and fantasy turns the 10-year-old me into somebody who wants to cut a hole in a pillowcase and turn it into a tunic and go fight with a stick in the front yard and pretend like I'm Legolas or something, you know? And science fiction turns a 10-year-old kid in me into just a kid standing outside looking at the vastness of existence. And I think that's a wonderful gift to give to the reader, you know? That's a gift I would like to impart. But I have a taste, a taste for, I guess what people call literary. I hate that setting, that term. But to me, what literary fiction does to the 10-year-old in me is it just sends him to his bedroom without any dinner, you know? That's not very great, I don't think, man.
You said you cut your teeth on horror. Why
Yeah.
is that? Talk about that a little bit.
That's just where, I mean, it's a little bit of a lie. Really, by the time I was 12, I'd read every Louis L'Amour there was at the time, 95 of them. And then I ran out of those and I started finding Conan. And Conan turned me on to, you know, lizard people with swords and stuff. And that brought me to a different part of the used bookshelf. And I started finding the horror. You know, the 80s, this was probably about 84, somewhere right around there. Maybe 82, 83, 84. And I just started finding these books with these lurid covers and just terrible, like, you know, skulls and, you know, stabby stuff going on. And that's where I went, you know. And then when I was, 16, I read my first Stephen King, I guess, Tommyknockers, and stayed up all night to read it, and I was hooked from there on out, man. But that's where I started. That's where I started out with horror. What horror movies? I guess horror fiction. Horror movies started out for me. Really about the same time with Jason and Freddy and everything when I was about 12 or 13. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I never got over it, man. I still am in love with it. I just inhale horror novels.
Well, I read a quote from you from the Nervous Breakdowns website. You wrote, I really only write in one genre. It's the same genre we all write in, I hope. It's called What I Would Like to Read. So, you know, with that quote in mind, what do you like to read? How does that inform your writing?
You know, I like to read all across the shelves. It definitely informs my writing. But, I mean, one week I'll read a Ian McEwan novel. The next week I'm reading an old Poppy Z. Bright novel that I remember that I had, and right after that I'm reading somebody's take on Conan or something. It just all over the shelves, man. And one place I return to again and again I found is flash fiction. I love flash fiction anthologies. I just suck those up, man. Flash fiction. If I could make a living doing flash fiction, that might be what I'd be doing. But flash fiction, it's always kind of like you give it away, you know, for contributors' copies or something.
Well, that same website, I got two great quotes from there.
Yeah.
This I really liked. You wrote, just reading in your small little province is a sure way to write insular stuff. Read stuff that you think you're going to be insulted by. It'll challenge you. It'll make you mad, or you might fall in love with it. When people tell me that they don't read Da Vinci Code or something, I'm always pretty sure that it's fear, that they might find something there to like, and they would then feel less like themselves. Which makes me think of, you know, that stereotypical guy who's saying, well, I don't even own a television. You know, I don't watch that junk.
Yeah.
So,
no, but
yeah,
I mean, people are always surprised. Like, I've read every Dan Brown novel and loved them, you know. And I remember when Twilight was owning the world, one of my neighbors brought it over and he said, "Hey, you read books, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I read books." And
you read books.
Yeah. And he said, "My wife just read this and I read it and I really like it. I think you might like it." And I wanted to be friends with the neighbor, and you know, I didn't know all about it, but I knew a little bit about it by then. And so I said, "All right, I'll give it a read this weekend." And I looked up like 3 days later and I'd read all 4 of them, you know, because they were just totally addictive. But I feel really confident that as a writer, we want to reach the largest audience we can. We want to reach everyone. And you don't do that by just staying in your safe little corner. You need to engage the stuff that's on the bestseller list, definitely, because that's what everybody's reading. You need to know what it is that's fascinating the public, you know. And then you also need to go to the micro presses and read the stuff there happening at the garage band level that's going to infuse its DNA into the next bestseller. You know, you just need to be everywhere that you can. You know, when I have the luxury of time, I like to just go to my shelf or go to a shelf in a bookstore and just pick a random book and tell myself I'm going to read this book cover to cover, whether, you know, it's something that I would be interested in or not. And oftentimes for me that'll be nonfiction. It'll be some. It'll be about like an earthquake somewhere that I didn't even know about, but I always learn, and it always infuses itself into my own writing.
Do you reread books often?
I do, yeah.
What kind of books do you reread? What are some of your favorite books that you find yourself returning to again and again?
I just now reread last year's My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I really, really liked that book. The book I've read the most times is Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door. I've read that 11 times now, I think.
Oh, wow.
And each time each time I read that book, I think, well, I'm not even writing horror. I'm just writing about flowers and rainbows, because he's doing the real work, I've read The Shining 6 times now, I think.
Oh, now you're talking Kelly's language.
All right, man.
Oh, yeah, that's my favorite of all time.
I've read Crying a Lot 49, I don't know, probably 8 or 10 times. I've read Ballast probably 7 or 8 times. I've read Knock 'em Stiff, that story collection from Donald Ray Pollock, probably 5 times now, I guess. I've read Sarah Grant's Come Closer, I don't know, 5 or 6 times. I love to revisit books because it's like I'm ducking under the hood of this amazing vehicle, and I get to tinker with the engine and from a different angle and see maybe how it works, Maybe I can steal a little of the magic. That's what I always hope.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about, by the way, I'm really enjoying Mongrels. Wanted to tell you that.
Thank you.
Talk a little bit about what's the plot synopsis of Mongrels. Talk a little bit about that book.
Mongrels, it's narrated by a teenager who was born into a werewolf family, and he's waiting to see if he's going to wolf out or not. And werewolves, they have to live on the fringes of society. They're always moving from town to town, from under the table cash job to under the table cash job, all across the Southeast. They drive from way eastern New Mexico to the Atlantic Ocean a couple of times, just as he grows up, just trying to stay below the radar. That's the werewolves. It's not that they're scared of people. They're scared of people knowing they exist. That's when things get problematic. Yeah.
What was the genesis of that book? How did you start that?
It started out, Jesse Bullington, I don't know if you know his work. He's a fantasy writer, kind of does horror stuff a little bit too. He was editing a collection, Letters to Lovecraft, and he called me up or emailed me, I forget. We used to live in the same town when this happened. And he said, hey, man, why don't you write a story for me for this? And he said, it's all going to come out of Lovecraft's, what's that essay, that big 80-page essay?
Supernatural horror literature.
Yeah, that's it. And he said Letters to Lovecraft are all going to ramp out of that big essay. And I had it on my Kindle, because I was teaching it at that time. And so I called it up on my Kindle and I searched for the word werewolf. And there was one mention of werewolf in that essay. And so I wrote him back immediately and said, yeah, I can write a story, because I can always write a werewolf story, And then, of course, I forgot. I told him yes. And then it popped up on my calendar. You got a story due tomorrow. And I'm like, crap, what am I going to do? So, so I had a whole jug of chocolate-covered sunflower seeds. And I just ate the whole jar real fast, and I was all jittery. And then I wrote down the story Doc's Tale.
Writing tips from Stephen Graham Jones.
Yeah. And then I wrote the story Doc's Tale that afternoon. And that's in my collection after the people lights have gone off. But and I thought, that's it. I wrote a werewolf story now, and I moved on to do other stuff. And then a month or two later, I realized that story was still happening in my head. And so I sat down and I just wrote down the rest of the novel in 2 weeks. And it was like it'd been hiding in my head the whole time,
Was the movie Near Dark in your mind at all when you wrote that?
Oh, definitely. It's been in my mind. It's been in my mind and my heart since 87, I guess. I say since 87. I actually didn't see Near Dark in the theater. I saw it when it came to VHS. So it's been probably 88 for me. But,
those days.
Yeah, I know, man. But no, yeah, Near Dark. If I had a model, it was Near Dark. And I did have a model, and it was Near Dark.
Well, yeah, I don't mean this in any negative way at all, but it mirrors it somewhat. I love the book.
Thank you. Well, actually, in the trade paperback of Mongrels, they let me put an essay in the back, and in the essay I talk about Near Dark and everything that Mongrels owes to it. Because I didn't want to pretend.
Oh, really?
I didn't want to.
I'm reading the ebook, so I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to pretend like this is all me. I mean, I stole so much of Mongrels from everybody. Like in Mongrels, the werewolves age in canine years when they're shifted, and I stole that from Art McCammon from the Wolf's Hour 89. I stole the title from George Martin's Skin Trade. Somebody in there calls himself a mongrel. I stole the conservation of mass from Carrie Vaughn, Kitty in the Midnight Hour. I stole the way these werewolves look from Whitley Strieber's Wolfen, you know. So I just kind of I took all the werewolf stuff I knew and just kind of Frankensteined it into what I thought was a creature that made sense, you know.
And in the novel, a full moon does not cause a person to wolf out.
No, it doesn't. That's never made sense to me. Because I really don't know of any qualitative difference between moonlight and sunlight. I know that
it's just reflected sunlight. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and maybe the regolith, the dust of the moon, is imbued with some certain property that we don't know about that changes the reflection. I don't know, but even if we do accept that there is some qualitative difference, then there's no explanation for why a half moon wouldn't cause like an arm to wolf out or something, you know. So I wanted to make a creature I could believe in, and I couldn't believe in a creature that is triggered by the moon, you know.
Just in that regard, in the original Wolfman movie with Lon Chaney, they didn't have a full moon.
No, they didn't. They didn't. I know. That's so cool.
It's the wolfbane that was causing it.
Exactly, because when they lay that bundle of wolfbane they found on the way to see Bela Lugosi on the table, he like shrieks. He like draws back from it. He knows what's going to happen, you know. And actually, the Wolfman was my model for the werewolves in Mongrels, because y'all remember about 10 or 11 minutes into the Wolfman, Lon Chaney gets bitten by the werewolf. You can see it in silhouette, kind of the back of the soundstage, and it's obviously a German Shepherd, a 4-footed werewolf. And then when Lon Chaney shifts, he shifts into this Wolfman, this human body wolf head thing, and that never makes sense. Why does a 4-footed bite turn somebody into a 2-footed werewolf? I could not process that. I could have written it off to special effects of 41, but I thought that was kind of just dismissing the whole movie. So what I did was I came up with a system whereby my werewolves, if you're born into the blood, the werewolf blood, then your body can take the shift. It can go all the way full wolf, or full Whitley Strieber wolf anyways. But if you're bitten by one of those wolves as a human, you're not born into the blood, but you get infected with the blood, then you can only transform halfway. And your halfway form is caught between wolf and man, and it's a super painful state to be in. And you're just a rager. You just bite and get shot. You never last very long.
Yeah, you're just a nutcase, basically.
Yeah. But you know, the one thing I never could get over with even my werewolves is the act of transformation. That's got to burn a lot of calories, you know, to grow all new bones and claws and hair and teeth and everything. And it's got to cost like 25,000 calories or something. And how can you eat that much? So when my werewolves come out of their transformation, they're ravenous. They have to eat immediately, you know. And for that reason, they're always real careful about taking their trash out before dark every night, because that's the first thing they'll eat is the trash, you know?
Yeah, that's so interesting. That and French fries.
Yeah, French fries are dangerous to get addicted to, man.
Yeah, if French fries are dangerous if you're a werewolf.
They are.
That's so awesome.
Do the werewolves in your novel have their when they change? Do they still have
their brain?
Yeah, their brain.
Yeah. They as they become more mature, more adult, they do. The first few shifts, they're just kind of like a new. They don't totally when they first shift, but they learn to be mostly themselves. Yeah.
You really did put a lot of thought into it. One of the ways that werewolves can get killed is, I don't want to give too much away, but is by driving a car at the wrong times, or wrong things happen.
Yeah.
While driving a car 80 miles an hour on the interstate.
Yep. Well, yeah, I mean, steering wheels and shift levers and gas pedals aren't made for werewolf appendages, you know? So and also, interior of cars are not made for the anger that a werewolf feels when he can't shift gears. You know?
It's not road rage, it's werewolf rage.
Yeah.
Werewolf road rage.
So I guess silver bullets don't play a role in this.
They do, actually. They do.
Yeah.
I did so much research into silver, trying to find the origin point for where silver got infused into the werewolf mythos, the legend. I never found the actual origin point. I found that back in 1640, in a place called Greifswald in Germany, silver is used against werewolves in, you know, urban legend or whatever you call it, folktale. But really, I think silver is antimicrobial, of course. And you know, if werewolfism is going to be an infection, it makes sense to combat it with something that's antimicrobial. Silver is often associated with the church, and if werewolves are evil, then come at it with something holy, of course. But I've talked to some people who have told me that when Lycaon, that Greek guy who Zeus cursed to be a wolf, he cursed to like go and have wear your inner nature on your outside, is what he told the Lycaon, because Lycaon had done some bad stuff. When he goes out to live as a wolf in the hinterlands or whatever, Athena goes and hunts him with silver arrows. Somebody told me that, and I haven't been able to track it down, so I'm not sure it's true. But the silver is always associated with the moon, anyways. And so there's all these like points where silver and the werewolf touch, and I've never been able to find the actual initial point of it. But I kept the silver because I feel really confident that supernatural creatures and stories need an Achilles heel of some sort. The same way, like the vampire didn't really catch fire in the popular imagination really until Nosferatu, I think. And I think the reason that is because Nosferatu made the vampire susceptible to sunlight, to daylight, and that became something that we humans can't go hand to hand and battle a vampire, but we can walk that vampire in front of a window in the daytime or something. We can use our brains, which is really our evolutionary strategy through our whole 6 million years, use our brains to beat the monster. And it's the same way with werewolves. We can't go toe-to-toe with a werewolf. We lose every time, but we can melt down something and make a silver bullet, or a silver something, anyway.
There once was a writer named Seabury Quinn who did his Jules de Grandin character, a cult detective.
Huh?
And he had a werewolf story where he made the argument, well, silver bullets were necessary in the day when you had bullets that were like those round balls.
Yeah.
He took like a 45 automatic and killed a werewolf. He said, I shot a hole through him the size of a man's fist. That's as effective as silver, was his argument.
Yeah, no, that's what well, also my werewolves, if you shoot them enough times, they die too. It doesn't have to be silver, definitely. But I agree, back when you could melt something down into a ball, then a silver bullet actually made sense. Nowadays, silver has such a higher melting point than lead, and also when you try to make silver with your bullet making stuff, you often ruin your little canisters and everything because the high heat. Also, silver cools differently than lead. Lead will keep close to its same size. Silver shrinks a lot, So if you're trying to make a 45 caliber slug, you're going to end up with a 38 or something. And that's going to jack your whole system up, But yeah, silver bullets, and also silver doesn't hold together as well as lead. So when you shoot it, it tends to go into shrapnel. So there's all kinds of problems with having silver bullets nowadays. They don't make a lot of sense, actually. You see them as props, but shooting them is a whole different thing.
Well, I know you hate talking about werewolves, but
yeah.
Well, I'll get to that next question in a second. Why, in your mind, are werewolves better than zombies or vampires? Why do you like them better? Maybe.
Why do I like? Yeah, whether they're objectively better, I don't know. I think.
Yeah, right.
I think we cycle through those three creatures through vampires, zombies, and werewolves. It's not like a fad, but in the early 2000s, the vampire got used up. It got too shiny and glittery, and it kind of got defanged, And so we needed those creatures in the night that were going to kill us, and so we turned to the zombie, and the zombie was this like empty metaphorical space we could pour story into and look into it and see ourselves, The message of every zombie story is always, we're the monsters. It's never they're the monsters. It's always we're the monsters. And I think right now it's just time to cycle to the werewolf. And I think the reason the werewolf is prime now is, number one, the vampire and the zombie are a little bit used up. They're not, they're always going to come back. They're not used up forever, but they need a little resting period, I think. But what the werewolf story, what it does is it tells us that we have bodies, that we have urges, that we have an animal inside us, we have animal instincts. And we live in an age right now where technological and medical advances are making us feel like any day we're going to figure out how to upload our brain into a server, and we're already doing it, like with our phones. We're already putting our contacts, our friends, our notes, our lives, our secrets into our phones. We're already trying to upload ourselves into our devices, and we think that we can still exist like that in a server, on a computer, in a data bank or something. But that totally neglects the fact that we have these animal urges. I don't think we can live in circuits. I think we have bodies, we have animals we need to let run every once in a while. And I think the werewolf tells us that over and over.
Speaking of animal urges, is that a cat or a werecat behind on the wall.
Oh,
That's
that's
Tootses.
Toonses, yeah. Yeah, Toonses is always my favorite. I always know those people shouldn't get in that car, but they always do, man.
The driving cat. Yeah. Where did you get that? And why do you have it?
Well, he's kind of my hero because he always fools people into thinking we're just going to the store, we're going to the beach, and it never works out, you know. And I love that, but I have no idea where I got that. There's no telling.
That's hilarious.
I'm like, where is this cat from? I'm not.
I think it was Saturday Night Live, a Saturday Night Live sketch.
Yeah,
It
it
was
was
Saturday Night Live sketch. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm guessing it's from the early '80s, but I'm not sure about the date actually.
Yeah, he would always take everybody for a drive, and then
Yeah.
the car would crash because he is a cat. So
Now I see you got Wolfman Jack. I'm just going over your wall. What do you got?
Oh yeah. Oh, I got. Can you see? That's Dee Snider. She's over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's over there
Yeah.
by Waylon. Yeah, yeah.
Human
Oh.
organ. Jesus.
Oh yeah, yeah. Almost. Yeah.
Steven, I'm looking at all of those convention badges. You must
Oh yeah.
travel just a shit ton. Do you have a favorite con you like going to? And then how do you reconcile that with a family and your writing schedule?
Mhm. I've got a very understanding family. That's really nice. But I still, you're right. I am gone a lot. I'm always on the road. It seems like. I bet I spend, man, 4 or 5 days out of every 2 weeks gone, probably just doing stuff.
Wow.
My favorite con. Wow, I'd never thought about it. You know what I found lately is that when I get invitations to go to this or that convention or festival or conference or whatever, I'm not basing it on the city it's in. I'm not basing it on the content of the festival or the convention. I'm basing it on whether there's a distinct chance I'm going to get to ride the elevator with a Klingon, you know, because that makes me intensely happy when I get in there and there's a Klingon standing there. I'm like, this is where I belong. You know, this is my happy place. And that's all I really care about. And where that first started happening for me was here in Denver. There's a con called Starfest, which has Horror Fest kind of under it. And that's the first place that I got hooked on the whole costume, you know, the cosplay thing. And we also now have Denver Comic Con here in Denver, which is like so monstrously huge and everything. It's a really good time. So yeah, it's like probably those kind of pop culture cons where there's so many people dressing up. That's what I love, is all the dressing up.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, since you have Friday the 13th, the final chapter on your wall,
Oh yeah, yeah.
do you root for him over Freddy when they fought?
Oh, I think I did,
The
and I
eternal
think
question.
yeah, no, I think when they fought, I root for Jason because he felt like the underdog, you know, because all he has is like brute strength. Freddy's got supernatural powers and a wit to him, you know, that gives him the upper hand, I think. So that makes Jason the underdog, and I'm going to root for the underdog probably.
I had never seen a Friday the 13th movie until that time, but I ended up rooting for him just because
Yeah.
I've grown really. This is not that I don't like the character.
Mm.
He's a character I love to hate. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Freddy is somebody I want to see get the stuffing beaten out of him.
Yeah, no, he's asking for it, man. Freddy's asking for it. Yeah.
Steven, what are some of your favorite werewolf movies and stories?
Favorite werewolf movie is probably going to be Ginger Snaps, man. I love Ginger Snaps. I think
It's a good
that's about as good as it gets. Yeah. I like that recent When Animals Dream a lot. It's a really quiet kind of indie werewolf horror movie.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, it was solid, man. And for me, it all starts with The Howling. You know, that was the first werewolf movie I ever saw. The first werewolf novel I read was Wolfen. I think that was the first horror novel I read too, was Wolfen. And Wolfen kind of programmed me for werewolves. You know, I thought they should all be that cool. They weren't. They haven't all been that cool. But my favorite werewolf on the page has probably been Robert McCammon's Michael Gallatin character from The Wolf's Hour and the story collection that follows that up, the sequel to it. Michael Gallatin is just really cool. He's a British spy who kind of grew up as a werewolf in Russia. And, well, no, he's a Russian who grew up as a werewolf back in the trees, and then he became a British spy. I think that's how it works.
He's for the British.
Yeah, he's for the British. Yeah. and he fights Nazis, and he's just a cool dude. You know, he was my model for a werewolf, for how to be a good werewolf. You know.
That's such a great story. I've always wished that had been turned into a film.
Oh, I know. That'd be so killer, man. Yeah.
Speaking of,
Yeah.
what about any of your books? Have they been optioned for film, or are we
Yeah.
going to see something? We're going to see Mongrels?
I mean, every week there's stuff cooking with Mongrels. Yeah, there's always people calling about it and talking to the film agent, and you know how Hollywood is, like 99.9% of the stuff falls through. But you know, one of these weeks, one of them's going to catch, and I reckon something will happen. I think if Mongrels happens, if it gets adapted, it's going to get adapted to TV, not to a feature. It's an episodic novel. It's built more for TV.
Yeah, that would be a great Netflix miniseries or Hulu miniseries.
I know, that'd be really fun, really fun. But yeah, I've had some other stuff optioned, but nothing produced yet. Except, you know, I recently had a guy, Andrew Schwartz. He bought the rights to one of my short stories, The Elvish Room. He turned that into a short film. It played up at Fantasia, and it'll probably play other places. It's pretty fun.
And then I asked this of writers who might be looking forward to seeing something done. Will you be writing, or do you dabble in screenwriting at all?
I do, yeah. I mean, I teach screenwriting often, and I like when I have downtime, I read screenplays. That's what I love to do. Screenplays are so fun. And you know, like my first horror novel, actually, Demon Theory, is a hybrid screenplay novel. It's a novel told in screenplay format, kind of. And I've done that twice since then with The Last Final Girl and Zombie Bake Off. It's a really natural voice or tone or intersection for me to kind of take advantage of or work within or something like that. But I'm not sure if I'm the best person to adapt my own stuff or not, because I fear that novelists, we always, like the person who wrote the novel, we always think every part of it is too dear, you know, that it all matters. And it's a different media, you know. I mean, you need somebody to come in and be cool and brutal, and to push two characters into one character, and to compress 10 years into 2 years and all. And that's all stuff that I'm going to feel like, but I love these characters, but I'm afraid that my love of the characters would get in the way of adapting it, you know?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point. Casting too, you know, being involved with those kinds of choices. I remember when Interview with the Vampire came out. Before it came out, Anne Rice was just adamant that what a horrible movie it was going to be.
Yeah.
And then she saw the movie and changed her mind.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, there's some people we can't imagine Tom Cruise as, like Jack Reacher.
Yeah, that man should not be Jack Reacher. Jack Reacher is what, 6'5" or something?
He's a big dude. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you a Jack Reacher fan?
I'm not. I don't know if I'm a fan, but I've read one of them early on. Yeah.
Yeah. So I also read that you're obsessed, and the word was obsessed, I think, with country music, comics, horror movies, and old trucks. Is that accurate?
That's still accurate. That hasn't changed since I was like 12 years old, man.
Right. Well, at the risk of alienating Kelly Young and maybe half my audience, who are you? Kelly's laughing. Who are some of your favorite country music artists?
I grew up on Waylon, so he's always up there. Definitely. I was just actually listening to a lot
just
of
smile and nod, Young. Smile and nod.
I love Willie and Waylon. I love the old country. It's the new country.
Pancho and Lefty,
you know, just the last like 5 years, I started listening to a lot of Merle. Merle was always too slow for me growing up, but maybe I'm older now, so I'm going slower myself. So the past 5 years, I've been listening to a lot of Merle. Coming up through the 80s, you know, I mean, of course, how can you not listen to George Strait when you're in the country? And that was I still am a big Earl Thomas Conley fan. He kind of has synthesizer country, but it works for me. Like the plaintiveness and the longing in his voice just kills me every time. When Garth Brooks, Clint Black, I think Clint Black is one of the best phrasers that we've ever had in any music.
Yeah.
He is so
remember
good.
when Killin' Time came out?
Yeah.
What a great LP that was.
Oh, it's so good. And then when Garth came along in the early 90s, of course, that's where a lot of people draw the line. They're like, yeah, I can listen to 80s country, but I can't listen to Garth Brooks, you know. But I don't mind Garth. I think he did some really good stuff as far as I'm concerned. Lately, you know, and Reba was killing it in the 80s, man. In the 80s and the 90s, she could do no wrong, I think. And she's always had it, man. Charlie McLean from back then, I like her a lot. You know, on the recent scene, who I like is Jamie Johnson. Jamie Johnson really brings it, man. I like his just everything. I like most everything he does, really, I guess.
I have to confess, I'm pretty ignorant on the recent scene. I'm mostly
Yeah,
70s and 80s, early
yeah,
90s.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's largely where I am too. Because I mean, I used to drive tractor 16 hours a day, and you put it on the country station, and you listen to the same like 20 songs for 16 hours. And then in 2 weeks, it's a different 20 songs, you know. And so that's what I got trained on, definitely. But I did go in starting in about 94. I turned off my country music, and because I got sick of it, there were all these people doing country music that I didn't think they'd actually grown up in the country. You know, they just saw a opportunity to do something, and they thought they could add some steel guitar and
And
call it
Alan
country.
Jackson wrote a song about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like Alan Jackson. But um, I didn't. I mean, I kind of just like cherished my old country cassette tapes for like 10 years after that, you know. But then Jamie Johnson came on the scene, and he kind of made a space where people could start doing some stuff that I think is interesting, you know.
So, comic books.
Yeah.
Some of your
Oh,
favorite comic book superheroes and
yeah, man. My favorite comic superhero of all time is probably always going to be, well, yeah, Spider-Man. I guess Spider-Man. I've always identified with Pete's situation. You know, he's trying to maintain a teenager's life in high school while also fighting crime. You know, he's like living the dream and living the hell of every teenager, and I think that gives him a lot of storytelling space. Grendel, I love Matt Wagner's Grendel. I'll always and forever be in love with Matt Wagner's Grendel. He is
Yeah.
he's an assassin, but he's so like refined and so much smarter than everybody else and so much more capable. Grendel, he's my hero, and my favorite comic book of all time. It might be. I mean, I know it's a generic thing to say, but Watchmen. I think I've read Watchmen. I don't even know how many times. I love, love, love Watchmen. I get
Oh,
more
yeah.
from it every time I read it. You know. Of the Batman stuff, my favorite is probably going to be The Long Halloween. I read that once every year,
Mm.
kind of ritually. Um,
he's saying all the right things here, Kelly, isn't he?
God, no kidding.
Is that a scarecrow story or
no, it's a crime
No.
story, kind of. Yeah,
it's the crime story? Okay.
yeah.
If I remember right, it's been a couple of years since I read it, but it's the story takes place over 13 months. Is that
Yeah.
right, Stephen?
Yeah. No, it's. I think it's so good. Of recent stuff, you know, I think Jeff Lemire is knocking it out of the park, man. That dude is doing some like. I mean, Essex County was amazing, but Underwater Welder and him and Scott Snyder are doing that AD After Death thing right now, which is just blowing me away. Matt Kent is killing it, I think, with his mind management is so impressive. I'm keeping up with Benjamin Percy's Green Arrow right now. I'm keeping up with All New Wolverine. What's that guy? Brian Wood, his Starve. He has a title right now, Starve. It's on hiatus, but it'll come back soon, I think. It's about a chef on a reality show, and those are two things I'm like really opposed to. I don't watch reality TV, and I don't really care about food, you know. But Brian Wood is such a good storyteller; he makes it work, I think.
So it's so expensive to keep up with comic books these days.
Oh, it totally is, man. I mean, just the other day, just last Wednesday, I went in and I told myself, all right, let's only spend $12. And I came out, I'd spent $71. I'm like, what happened? You know?
It used to cost, just to show you how old I am, I remember when they were 10 cents.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice, man.
And then they were 12 cents for a long while, and you used to be able to buy 8 of them with $1.
Wow. Oh, that's nice. Nice.
Yeah, $12 these days. That's only 3 comics.
That is. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I have to wait for like the crap. I just blanked on the new stuff that Jeff Johns and DC is doing. Rebirth.
Yeah.
The Rebirth stuff. I'm pretty interested, but I had to wait on it until January when they do the collected omnibus.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
And
I
then
agree.
it approaches affordability for me at that point.
I agree. I totally agree. But I've been hearing from people that, you know, a lot of us to do that. A lot of us wait for the trade, you know, because it'll fit on our shelves better. We don't have to bag and board it and put it in a drawer and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah.
But the trick is that I hear that a lot of titles are dying on the vine, kind of, because people don't support the single issues. They wait for the trade, but it never actually gets to trade because it dies out at 8 issues or something, you know. And it'll be a great title, but it's not. I mean, people say it's our fault. It's the reader's fault, but I mean, you're right when you say that the individual comics are getting so expensive. You know, I mean, we're not
When
we're not in the early '90s anymore where we have to get like 6 copies of Max #1, you know, or anything. They're not doing that to us anymore.
I
But
can't justify spending $3 or $4 on something
Mm.
that I will read in 15 minutes, say.
yeah, no, I totally understand.
Well, you used to buy, you know, they went from being a newsstand to being a specialty shop item.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That changed things so much, and that kind of fed into the collector mentality, because when you bought them off the newsstand, every single issue had to be an on-ramp. It had to like re-explain what Thor's power was and who his friends were and all that stuff. Nowadays, comics no longer have to do that. If you get in at number 17 of a title, then it's your responsibility to go to the comic book store and buy 1 through 16 so you can catch up. And it's a, I mean, I don't know if it's a bad system, but it's not a cheap system, you know. And it's kind of exclusive too. You like the comic book culture. It's a good culture to be in, but it's a little bit exclusive, you know. If you don't know, like the 3 girls Peter Parker dated in high school or something, then you're kind of laughably out of it, you know.
Yeah, and have the money to afford to keep up
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have to ask this too before we
Mm.
get off the subject of comics, since I'm such a Batman fan. Everybody listening to this knows it. Any other favorites besides The Long Halloween?
I like what Scott Snyder's been doing recently, the Son of Batman and all the family affair, all that stuff. I like that a lot. Let me think. Your favorite Batman trades, or not trades, maybe graphic novels. You know, Hush. How can you not like Hush? I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Hush is one I read. That was excellent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And isn't there like a noir edition of Hush that's all black and white? That's
Yeah.
stuck? Yeah. I've always kind of coveted that on the shelf. You know.
Is there? I didn't know that. Is that
Yeah.
is that the only difference, or?
Yeah.
I think that,
it's,
yeah.
It's the same art, but it's all just black and white. And I think it's called Hush Noir.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I really like. It's not a popular one. I like that Jim Starlin one, The Cult. I think it's Jim Starlin. It's from, I don't know. I put it back in the early '90s probably. It's a real gritty Batman. It feels like Bernie Wrightson drawing. It might even be Bernie Wrightson, I guess. But I really like that story. I always like it. I like it when Batman gets broken down, you know, and has to fight his way back up, because it's always too easy for the rich kid to get a lot of gadgets and go beat up somebody, you know. But I like it when all that gets stripped away from Batman, and he has to rely on his wit and his will, you know. That's when I like him the best.
So you must have liked Nightfall then.
I don't
Where
know
Bane
if I'm-
breaks his back and he has to come.
Oh yeah, that's forever ago. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean I liked it and I was terrified. Yeah. yeah. That was back when we were all voting on Jason Todd, Living or Dying, right?
Oh man, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have an inkling back then which way it would go? I know
No.
I didn't.
No, not at all. No,
That had never been done before, I don't believe.
no, that was amazeen.
Not as a vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there were people who died in comics.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, Gwen Stacy she was one of the first big ones to die, right? In '71. Yeah.
I just remember, I don't know if it was the introduction to one of the issues later or what it was. It was somewhere where one of the writers was talking about how he usually would take a cab home and he decided to walk and everything because it depressed him so much, even though it was a real person dying, you know. And I can really relate to that, you know, because these characters were so real to me.
They totally are. They totally are. Like every time Spider-Man has to get across New York to bring Aunt May some medicine, like my heart is beating so hard because he's got to make it. You know, he's got to make it this time because Aunt May needs those pills. But he's got to fight. He's got to fight the Vulture first, and that always sucks. You know.
when did you read Spider-Man? What?
The first time I read Spider-Man was in Secret Wars #4. So that would have been about 82, 83, I guess, right around there. I found it on a round rack in a gas station for 75 cents. And on the cover of Secret Wars #4, the Hulk, well, I didn't know who the Hulk was at the time. I was 12 years old. He's holding up, he's got his arms out like this, and he's holding up a mouth, and then the little caption thing says he's holding up 3 billion tons of rock and he's getting tired or something like that. And, you know, Iron Man and Captain Marvel and all are down there about to be squished. And so I bought it and I was hooked, man. I read Secret Wars every year still. That's one of my ritual reads. I have to read Secret Wars. That's where it all starts for me. And actually, the round rack, how the round rack in the gas station would work was they would get like, the totally kind of random assortment of stuff, so it was hard to keep up with the title. And if you weren't one of the like first 3 people to get there, then you didn't get what you wanted anyways. Spider-Man was my first subscription ever. I subscribed and got Spider-Man in the mail for maybe a year or 2. It was so wonderful.
And you felt big time with that, I bet.
Oh, I did, man. I had mail. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I started to read Marvel because they had superheroes who looked like monsters. Because the thing that hooked me was, this was in the 60s. They had the Hulk versus the Thing.
Yeah.
And it was like King Kong versus Godzilla almost when you saw that. I had I knew who the Thing was. I had read some fantastic, but I had no idea who the Hulk was at that time. But it was an awesome cover.
Well, that's what Marvel was doing back then. They were making superheroes who were kind of cursed with something at the same time. Like Ben Grimm, definitely. And so it wouldn't be like, I'm Superman, I'm perfect. It would be like, I have all this strength, but at this cost. That's kind of what I saw as Marvel's wedge onto the marketplace.
Well, besides having complicated stories, the other thing which caught me as a viewer, just to say what started Marvel rolling, just briefly, they had better fight scenes.
Oh, because of Jack Kirby, huh? You think?
Yeah, because what you used to get, what he would get was, I'll give you an example. I just remember, I rarely bought Kimmy. They used to have all these Superman spin-offs. The one was Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah.
And they had one on the cover. It was Titano the Super 8 versus the Space Dragon from Krypton.
Yeah.
And I bought it, and I'm expecting like 3 pages of at least 3 pages of a fight. It's one panel is what you saw on the cover.
Yeah.
So you would often feel you would get like this great fight scene in DC, and you're disappointed when you pick it up. You pick up Marvel, you got a fight scene.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they kind of. I think they were influenced by professional wrestling.
Yeah.
You knew how to try things out and shift villains to heroes and other things.
Yeah. I feel like that was the old what they called the Marvel method, right? Where Stan Lee would like dictate a story idea to Jack Kirby, and Jack Kirby would go write it, and then Stan Lee would come back and add dialogue. And I think you ended up with those 3-page fight scenes because Jack Kirby, or whoever the artist was, had to do like 5 pages that day so they could pad out the story with fight scenes, and we were the ones who got to enjoy that. The wonderful fight scenes, definitely.
There was some miscommunications when they used to do that.
Yeah.
They had the wrong supervillain on a couple of them. And Stan Lee would then have to write because like the one, there was somebody in Thor named Ymer the Frost Giant, and Jack Kirby got Frost Giants mixed up with Storm Giants. so they had to become Scrag the Storm Giant because it worried me at the time because it was like they teamed him up with Surtur, who's the fire monster.
Yeah.
I was saying, why did they bring this Storm Giant out of nowhere when they have this great ice giant who they already had?
Yeah. But I love that kind of repair job on a story. I love Stan Lee having to change the story and the dialogue to match the art. I love those kind of like backbends, those narrative backbends. Like I heard a story once that Herschel Gordon Lewis, he shot a movie, like in 2 weeks or something like he would do, and they were going through an editing, and they noticed that the protagonist, the hero of the movie, for the first half of the movie, he was wearing his toupee, and for the second half, he forgot to put his toupee on. And they're like, "How are we going to do this? I mean, we don't have the money to reshoot." So Herschel Gordon Lewis he re-edited and recut, he re-rigged the story such that halfway through the movie, the protagonist's evil brother replaces him, and the protagonist's evil brother is bald. So, but I love those kind of fixes, man. I think those are so clever, I appreciate it.
They once, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was Robert Vaughn. They filmed a pilot, and then they wanted to make it in a movie, so they filmed some additional scenes. And then somebody noticed his hair, Robert Vaughn's hair was parted the wrong way. So they had to add a scene where he decides to, his hair got messed up and he says, "Oh, comb it the other way."
Oh, that's great. That's great.
I've got a couple of listener questions for you, Steve.
Yeah.
Jason White writes, I love The Night Cyclist. I loved it for many reasons, but one reason in particular is that it, along with the title, reminded me a lot of Stephen King's short story, The Night Flyer, only fashioned in your own voice. Was it your intention to write an ode to this awesome King story?
It was kind of an intention, yeah, because that story is definitely lodged in my head, and so once I realized that was the title, then I thought this is definitely going to be read. I mean, not alongside a King story, of course, but by people who know that story are going to see the similarities, you know. And so yeah, I had to try to do it as right as I could, you know.
And Michael DeBronzo wants to know, he says, will you ever return to the characters in Mongrels in future stories, possibly short story form, or do you think that it leaves off just where it needs to? It's really a great story.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a good question, and I've actually got the next two Mongrels novels pitched out, like in, you know, I've got a few page treatments for each of them. I just wanted to figure it out to see what would happen, and man, it's a cool story. I like the way it happens, but right now I don't have any plans to write those out. I did write the first page or two or three or something of Mongrels 2, but then I got hit with some other project and had to start it. But nobody was paying me to write it, which isn't to say I don't only write things that people pay me for, but when a paying job comes in, I usually will take that job over something
Sure.
that I'm writing on my own, you know. But I suspect that if I do get to continue the Mongrel story, to continue with Darren and Libby and the narrator, the kid, that I might go to comic books to do it, you know. I think I've already adapted one of the chapters from Mongrels into a little 10-page comic that's coming out from somewhere, or maybe it's already out, I don't know. And it was a really natural adaptation. It worked well, and I can see myself doing that with the later books or the later story ideas anyway.
Really, the comic is being published by someone?
It's not a standalone. It's part of an anthology, and it's Canadian, and I cannot remember the title of it. But I did the comic. Man, I did the comic long before the novel came out. I bet I did that comic probably about 20 months ago, and we finalized the art and everything, and it's all inked and ready, but I still haven't gotten a copy in the mail. Maybe it's because I've moved so many times. I don't know.
You wrote an excellent short story in Children of Lovecraft called Eternal Troutland.
Thank you.
I was curious, was the dog in that story based on one of your own dogs?
Oh, that big old Great Dane dude. You know, is it based? I've got a Great Dane right now, so it's quite possible, you know. And I've had growing up farming and ranching, we had dogs, like a different crop of dogs every week, you know, because the dogs are always getting run over and shot and fighting each other and killing each other, and the coyotes kill them, and they eat poison and they drink antifreeze. They die in like 10,000 different ways, like the werewolves and mongrels, you know.
Right.
And so we went through a lot of dogs, man. So it's hard to say that the dog in Eternal Troutland is any one dog, but you know, also I grew up reading Marmaduke, you know, and he was a bit. I don't know, nobody reads Marmaduke anymore, but Marmaduke is really still in my head, you know.
I told you before the break, I thought that was the best story in that collection.
Thank you. That's an honor. Thank you very much.
And I just say, if anybody reads it, you're going to go through this for a long while and go, and how is this Lovecraftian? And then it hits you, and it kind of all makes sense.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You teach creative writing at the University of Colorado, right?
I do.
So what's a creative writing class by you? What is that like for the students? What kinds of things are you trying to get across to them?
Cleanliness and intentionality and sincerity. Those are probably the three big things. And by cleanliness, I mean an absence of mechanical or grammatical errors. I have little patience for that kind of stuff. Intentionality, I want the students, or what I want from what I read is to feel like the writer is not struggling with the craft of writing or to deliver this to me. I want to feel natural. I want to feel like they're bending the words and the syntax and the punctuation and everything to greatest effect. And sincerity, I want to feel like the story matters to the writer. I don't want to feel like they're just kicking something out because they have a deadline or something. I want to feel like they're trying to find a space to live in the story. That's what I look for. Let's see. You know, I used to, for a lot of years, probably my first 10 or 12 years teaching fiction workshops, I would always require the students, the very first story they had to turn in was a genre story. And I mean, we would do like a roulette thing and try to figure out what genre. And we have, you know, science fiction, horror, fantasy, Western, spy, coming of age, young adult, erotica, surrealism. We'd have just, however many students in class would come up with that many genres, and we kind of assign them randomly. But what I found was I would do that one assignment, and they'd all turn into genre story. And then the next assignment, 80% of them would turn into genre story. And so what I did a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I quit having that requirement. I don't say they have to write genre anymore. And I still get 80% genre stories. And that thrills me that the audience and the writers and everybody has shifted that much in the last 17 years since I've started doing this. People are naturally going to genre instead of me having to chase them over there. And that makes me so happy.
Another quote for you. It seems irresponsible to me to produce a writer who can't make a living. That's a quote from you. Talk about that a little bit. You teach that in your classes as well.
Yeah, I do. And I'm like, I think writers should always be able to take assignments. They should, like you got Ellen Datlow on here next week. Sometimes Ellen Datlow will contact me and say, I need a story about this by then. About 3 weeks, I need a story about, X, Y, and Z. And I don't have anything in my head pertaining to X, Y, and Z. But because I try to be a professional writer, I make myself do that. And I try to be sincere in the doing of it. I get in there using the elements that she has provided me, that she's prompted me with. And then I try to write until I carve down to the beating heart of the story, and it's usually, for me, it's usually some father-son story. That's what it tends to be. But you've got to be able to take assignments for money. I think that's a really big, important part of writing. I mean, yeah, writing is about self-expression. It's about valid self-expression, I guess. But at the same time, it's about getting paid for your work. And literary fiction is great. I love literary fiction. Literary fiction quite often pays in contributors' copies, and it's hard to go to the grocery store and trade contributors' copies for bags of chips, So I want my students
next to impossible, one might say.
Yeah. So I want my students to be able to transform their stories into groceries. I think that's the first time that happened to me back in, I don't know, 94, 95, that I got a check and I went out and bought something with it. That like rung a bell in me. I'm like, you mean this can matter? This isn't just me in my room doing something, I mean, it's not. I mean, I'm making it sound like it's all about money. It's not all about money, but the money kind of proves to you that there's an audience who wants to read your stuff and that you're connecting with people in a way that they want more of,
Right.
And since this is Lovecraft easy, we should point out that Lovecraft couldn't make that transition.
Yeah.
Very true.
I mean, he wrote great stuff, but it wasn't what the editors wanted.
Yeah.
For good or for bad. For good from our point as readers, but for bad for him as making a living.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to know what's going to survive to the next generation. It seems, I mean, with Lovecraft, it seems like everybody decided to jump onto his mythos, and expand it and live in it and stuff. And yeah, he was writing fun stuff too, definitely. But there's so many good writers who just get left, they get forgotten, and I always am sad for that. And I always suspect it's going to be me too. I know, really what I think is happening, I think the video game and the novel are braiding together right now in a way that because I got out of the video game scene about Galaga in 1986, so I don't really know what's happening. I think I'm going to get left behind by that, because I think video games are infusing a new sensibility, a new like narrative possibility into fiction, into the novel, and I don't know what that is. And so I think I feel like I'm on a beach and the boat's sailing away. Everybody on there's get their controllers and telling stories like that, and I'm just back here saying, what about books,
Yeah, there is so much story. I've got a 14-year-old son, and he loves video games, and there is so much story in video games days, not just shoot 'em ups.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's wonderful stuff. I'm not at all saying video games are bad. I think they are the new way of storytelling we have. I just regret that I don't have whatever it takes to sit there and push buttons, I wish I did. I wish I could access or engage that, but I don't seem to have it, man.
It can also become addictive, as I discovered when I wasn't playing the video games you have now, which are incredible.
Yeah.
I was playing the old, Sega and Super Nintendo thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I remember playing Batman the Animated Series with my son. I got hooked to that one.
Oh, well, then you'd love the Arkham City.
I've seen those
You know,
trailers.
my son has those games, and I just saying it's a big commitment to go through that whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge game, and not only that, but it's open world. That's a big part of it too.
Yeah, it is.
It's just so
Wow.
so awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
well, speaking of books, what are some of your favorite books, Stephen?
Oh man,
I know it's probably a huge list.
No, it's definitely a big list. I always love Speaker for the Dead, Orson Scott Card. I love that novel so much. Louise Erdrich's Love Medicine, Stephen King's The Shining, Philip K. Dick's Ballast, Vonnegut's Breakfast of Champions, Scott Smith's A Simple Plan. Man, I know I'm forgetting half of them. There's a guy named Luigi Menahalo. He's an Italian guy. He wrote a novel called The Outlaws, which has been translated. I'd say it's been translated. It's probably been 25 years since it's been translated. All you can find is old copies anymore. That's an amazing novel, I think. It's about these Italian resistance fighters in World War II. These kids, they're 15 years old, living up the mountains, and the Germans are occupying their town or whatever, or somebody bad is. I don't remember exactly. And so they want to be good resistance fighters, and what they do is they do these raids down in the town to try to do little skirmishes, but they want to be nice too, so they wrap their clubs in all this padding so they won't really hurt anybody, and it's just they're so nice, and they have such big dreams. I love to read about dreamers. I mean, I think I keyed on Don Quixote probably when I was 21 or something. I read it around then, and that's kind of been my model ever since then. I love to read about people who dream, people who insist that there's a better reality just past the scrim of this one,
I see that you wrote an introduction to Burnt Offerings.
Yeah, I love Burnt Offerings, yeah. That's a novel, and Robert Marasco is one of those writers who's kind of been left behind, and I say he's been left behind like we all evilly drove away from him. Really, he didn't write a lot of books. That's kind of what gets him left behind, but that's a good novel, The Burnt Offerings, I think.
I've assumed you've seen. I've only seen the movie. I assumed you've seen it.
Yeah. I
How
like the movie
faithful
too.
is the movie to the book?
Oh, it's probably 70% faithful, 75%. It's pretty faithful.
I gathered the ending was a little different because I saw Dan Curtis use that similar ending in Night of Dark Shadows. So I
don't know that. Huh.
The one where I don't want to give too much, but it's like they're going to leave, and then let me go back into the house for a minute.
Yeah. I don't remember. I've read the book more than I've seen the movie, so I think I've overwritten the movie with the book.
Yeah, I mean, I since he used it in an earlier film, unless he had read that novel before and borrowed it from that, I figured he tacked it onto that movie.
Could be.
Well, to wrap up, I've got a couple more questions. I don't know if you have any more. Do you believe in the supernatural?
Yeah, I think it's safe to believe in the supernatural, even if I never see it. I mean, what do they call that? Is it Pascal's wager about?
Yeah, Pascal's wager.
Yeah, about. Can you? I don't remember the wording of it. Do you remember the wording of it?
And I could paraphrase it probably. It basically means that it's safer to believe in God than not, because you've got everything to gain if you do believe.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's
maybe a bit of a false dichotomy, but I don't know how that. If you can apply that to other supernatural phenomena.
What is Ursula Le Guin has that one thing she says that people who don't believe in dragons often get eaten by dragons. And I think that's, for me, that's a great reason to believe in werewolves. Because I don't want to get eaten by a werewolf.
Well, I was going to say it's a question of whether you believe in the devil as a creature of hell, or as something like Cthulhu or the King in Yellow or whatever.
Yeah. I don't know about all those like grand epic kind of things. I don't know. I don't really know if I believe in that or not. But Bigfoot, I believe in Bigfoot. I believe in these terrestrial things.
Well, then you have the kid in Stephen King's. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on it. His vampire novel, Salem's Lot. Remember the kid in Salem's Lot?
Yeah.
Because he reads all these books and comic books about vampires. He's the one person who knows what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
Exactly.
But if you go
Yeah.
back to the old legends of vampires, they weren't like that at all. They'd be walking around in sunlight.
True.
There was
Yeah.
something about where the full moon may have come in with werewolves.
Mhm.
There was a legend of it's in this mammoth horror novel called Varney the Vampire, which only
Yeah, I've
read
read-
if you're of historical interest.
no,
Of
yeah.
moon reviving. A vampire can be killed any normal way, but if you leave him in the moonlight, face up, he comes back to life. They later made some 1940s movie called The Vampire's Ghost with that premise.
Oh, that's really cool. You know, from right around that same time, because of Barney the Vampire, there was a long serial novel, Wagner the Werewolf.
Oh yeah, I read that too.
Yeah, with Wagner the Werewolf is also some turgid reading, man.
I'll tell you, I've read them both, and I say Wagner the Werewolf is superior to Varney the Vampire.
All right.
That one I actually like. It's a little by a guy named Reynolds who was a better. He was probably more popular than Dickens, but he was a better yarn spinner than whoever wrote Varney the Vampire. Because if you ever read that book, it goes off in 20 different directions and it switches. You know, whole plot lines get abandoned.
Huh.
It's
You know, Dumas has a pretty good werewolf novel from back then. The Wolf Leader. It's a really pretty good novel. Yeah.
Interesting little point. The name of the werewolf is something like Thebald.
Yeah, T-Ball or something. Yeah.
It may have been the origin. Somebody pointed out it may have been the origin of Lawrence Talbot. The surname Talbot was Thebald.
That makes a lot of sense. I never thought about that. I like that. Yeah, and there's also a silver bullet in the Wolf Leader too. It doesn't actually kill the werewolf, but it does injure it a little bit. Anyway, no, is it? I'm lying. No, there is. Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Hey, Stephen.
Yeah.
Is Mapping the Interior your first novella length?
No, I've done Sterling City, which is more science fiction, and I have a collection of what they call novellas, 3 Miles Past, but I don't know. I don't call them novellas. I think they're long stories. I know there's all these like different gradations. There's what novelette or something, but maybe it's a novel. Maybe those are novelettes. I think they're probably, one of them is about 20,000 words. I think the other two are probably 12 or 15,000 words, which I don't know. That's bordering on, but to me that's bordering on not being a novella. But I don't really know the rules or the definitions. But
I think it's 17.5 supposedly.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a standalone novella published, Sterling City. It's about a kid farming who encounters a giant chrome caterpillar. Things happen.
It has become my favorite length story to consume as I've gotten older and as there's just so much product out there.
Mm.
Yeah, you've gotten older, all right. But
do you well, what do you feel? You've written short stories, you've written a ton of novels and novellas. I feel like, especially for the horror story, the novella is the perfect length.
It is. It's a really good length, and I'm glad the novella is kind of coming back in fashion. Maybe do we have James Patterson to thank for that with the bookshot stuff? I don't know, but
I think we have a reduced attention span in the internet age to thank for that, and at least partially, my opinion.
Yeah, you know, I remember back in the 90s, at least with literary fiction, you'd always buy a collection of stories, and there'd be like if there's 12 things in the table of contents, the first 11 would be 12 to 25 page stories, and the 12th story would always be a novella, because you always write novellas, but people would always there's no place to publish a novella. There used to be no place to publish a novella, but now that doesn't happen anymore. Now there are starting to be publishers interested in novellas, and it's really interesting. And I mean, I don't know if it's because of e-publishing or what it is exactly, but you have people like Larry Barron and John Langan. They both write their stories always really go the max length, and for good effect, definitely. And I think you're right, Kelly. The horror audience has a taste for that. It is a very comfortable length, and you can fit as much story into a novella, about as much story as you can into a movie, I think. And maybe that's part of the appeal. I don't know.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
When I read Eternal Troutland, it was one of those stories which I felt I'm going to have to reread multiple times.
Yeah.
Are there any horror stories by other writers that you would put in that category? That is something.
Let me think. You know, one story that I read over and over. It's not that I'm. I don't. I mean, I read it over and over to learn more from it. Is Joe Lansdale's "The Night They Missed the Horror Show," because I think that story is always a good reminder to me that I, as a horror writer, have to go one step further than the reader can go by his or herself. You know, I think that's why people pay horror writers, because we will go into we will go that one step further than they can go alone. You know, and that story, Joe's story, always reminds me of that.
Well, my last question is, well, you got Mapping the Interior coming up, which, by the way, I obviously haven't read the story, but I really love that premise.
Thank you.
So I'm very much looking forward to reading that. Is there anything else coming up that you can talk about, or anything that you're working on that you can talk about?
I just now finished writing a slasher, and I'm about to get notes back from the agent on that, and we'll probably try to sell it soon here. I've also written a big crime novel set in West Texas. We'll start mailing that out soon. In May, right before Mapping the Interior, I have a comic book coming out, a single issue thing. It's going to be hardback, called My Hero, and it's a comic book without any art, you know. So instant bestseller is what I'm thinking.
Comic book without any art?
Yeah. No, but it's a. I said there's no art, but I put like my whole heart into that book. You know, it took me longer to write those 24 pages than it's taken me to write a lot of my novels. You know, and then me and the publisher and the letterer and everybody has been working on that book for like a year solid now. And I'm just now, in the next couple of days, I'm getting more notes on it I had a friend who hadn't seen it before, and I wanted some new eyes across it, so he's giving me notes on that. And it's out in May, you know, and I'm really, really proud of it. I think it's something that hasn't been seen before, I think, you know.
Well, Steven, I really appreciate you being on the show. It's been really great talking with you.
It's been great talking to y'all. We could do this for hours more, I suspect.
Yeah, I think so. But you guys have any more questions before we let Steven go?
No, he's been a great guest.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Steven. I hope to talk to you again sometime soon.
Let's do it, man. Take it easy.
All right. Have a
Great
good
to see you,
night.
Stephen.
Good night.